Today we're learning the Maamar Vata, the Titzave of the Rebbe, that he said in 1981 and distributed in 1992. And we learned yesterday interesting statement, the difference between Matisyahu and the time of Hanukkah, that the Mesiras Nefesh by the Jewish people at the time was not by all Jews, whereas during Purim, Mordechai's time, it was. And to that, Rabbi here left me a message, even though he wasn't at the shir, which is wonderful to see that he's preparing, like a real student. And why don't you tell us what your question is, your questions?
Well, that first of all, what was the Mesiras Nefesh in the times of Purim? Other than fasting for 3 days, there was a gezerah against them, but it wasn't to convert. It was just a gezerah. Haman wanted to wipe out the Jews. It wasn't if you convert, if you worship Avodah Zarah, then you will be saved. So what was the Mesiras Nefesh? And the idea that the Moshe Rabbeinu of the door affected all of the Yidden, but we see that Mordechai was not successful in keeping the Jews from attending Achashverosh's Suda.
Okay.
So that was my question, a two-part question.
Two-part question. So first, to answer your second question and going back to the first. Historically, your statement is erroneous, is wrong. Simply historically. There was a long time between their eating at the Suda and Mordechai getting involved. That's, you look into the commentaries. Into his...
So when did Mordechai become the Moshe Rabbeinu of the door?
Wait. So in other words, you're right that during the time when they went to eat from the Suda, they were not having Mesiras Nefesh. That's correct. But that was much earlier. When Mordechai shows up and gets involved with the story of Purim, that part of the story, that's the story, part of what happened, they did. And where is the source for this? It's the Alter Rebbe in Torah Or. I'm surprised that he doesn't bring it in the references. I'm very surprised. And the Alter Rebbe says it, no one else says it. So it's a chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe says that for an entire year, I don't remember the exact verbatim quote, but the idea is like this. Olo machsheves chutz. I think those are part of the words of the Alter Rebbe. It didn't enter the mindset of anyone, lahamir daitam, to rebel against their Jewishness, and they stayed b'mesiras nefesh to be Jewish. A chaver of mine told me that he recently saw, but he doesn't remember where, a source for the Alter Rebbe. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't need a source. If the Alter Rebbe says it, then as far as we're concerned, it's okay. But it's always good to have another source, but I don't have that right now for you. So that's as far as that's concerned. Now, to explain that a little better. When we talk about Mesiras Nefesh, and your question, part of your question was, well, Haman wanted to kill the Jews, and it doesn't imply that if they converted, he wouldn't kill them. That's also wrong, according to the Alter Rebbe. If, in other words, from what we understand from the Alter Rebbe's words, is that if they would have converted to Haman, to Goyishkeit, right? If they would have given away their Yiddishkeit, their faith, he would have left them alone. Because he was looking to kill Jews, Isser. If you're not Jewish anymore, I'm not killing you. Why would he kill him?
Perhaps it would help if we knew the Mor Makomos for the Alter Rebbe, but I don't recall reading anything of that in the Gemara.
I know.
In Megillah.
I know. I know.
So this is a real chiddush.
It is a real chiddush. But if the Alter Rebbe knew the same Gemara that you and I knew, and if the Alter Rebbe writes
Maybe
it,
maybe this is in Nistar.
No, the Alter Rebbe. I mean, it's brought in Nister. It's brought in Torah Or, which is the Alter Rebbe Sefer of Chassidus. But the Alter Rebbe, he's not saying a Kabbalah thing. He's saying a factual thing on the ground. And by the way, could you prove it otherwise? You can't prove it otherwise. How can you prove it? Go ahead. Do you have a counter argument to what he's saying? That with proof?
Well, if you show me a medrash, if you show me that it's in a medrash, or you show me that it's in a, there's got to be a court for it.
No, you're not. You didn't understand what I just said. Where does it say otherwise that it can't be?
You can't disprove a negative. You can't disprove a negative. It's a logical fallacy. I can't disprove a negative.
No, wait. The fact is that the Yidden were saved. So,
okay.
So the Alter Rebbe's way of thinking.
So that the logical extension of that, according to what you're saying, is being saved requires Mesiras Nefesh.
That's right.
Oh.
That's right. Well, that's the point in the Maamar, and the point even gets stronger in the Maamar that the Rebbe makes the comparison in this and in yesterday in today's chapter. We're going to learn that the difference between Mordechai and Moshe, forget about Matisyahu, Moshe, and the Rebbe says that Moshe's period didn't involve Mesiras Nefesh, and that's a fact on the ground too. It didn't. The Mesiras Nefesh came during the time of, in other words, during Matisyahu time, it could have used Mesiras Nefesh, and he did use, but he didn't impact everyone. Whereas Mordechai did, and that's why they were saved. So if you're going to argue, well, if Matisyahu didn't have Mesiras Nefesh, if not everyone had Mesiras Nefesh during Matisyahu's time, why did Hashem save them? Well, number one, we know. I mean, I was down there in King Ir David, and in Yerushalayim, right outside of the wall, and they found over there, if it's true, they found written in Greek, here was a shul. So I asked the guy, why was it written in Greek? He says, because they were Hellenists. They had a shul and they were Hellenists. So that's not Mesiras Nefesh. If you're Hellenist, you're not having Mesiras Nefesh. And when you say there's no Midrashim, there are Midrashim. And the Gemara says it too. The Gemara says that Mordechai gathered 24,000 children. So what do you mean they weren't? So the Alter Rebbe's position that
gather all the children you want. How is that Mesiras Nefesh?
They're going to shoot you. You're celebrating Yiddishkeit in the streets, and they're against it. They're going to kill you. What do you mean? How is that Mesiras Nefesh?
They had it all planned out. It wasn't going to happen now. It's going to be on. That was the whole point of the Goro that Haman made.
I'm asking you, if it's the decree, and the Achashverosh is siding with Haman, and you go and gather children in a public forum, you're not fearful they're going to kill you? There's only one thing that will stop you from killing them. If you say, we're not Jewish, and therefore you're going to dismantle the gathering, and we're not going to say the psukim. They could have done that.
And the sister says, you can do whatever. The decree was scheduled. It's going to happen then. Until that day, we do nothing. Until that day, the Jews are safe. On that day, one day, which Haman picked, that's going to happen. So you can gather 24,000 kids, and you know nothing's going to happen because the scheduled date is like, almost a year in advance.
Wait.
Another thing. didn't Mordecai tell way back at the beginning? Didn't Mordecai tell the people not to attend Ahasuerus' dinner?
Okay.
That's part of my argument.
Yeah, but they didn't. But they didn't listen.
That's exactly what Esther says.
But that's a year before. You fine, but that's a year before. The Alter Rebbe is arguing and positioning and saying that they did tshuva, and that itself brought about. That's exactly his point. That was their Mesiras Nefesh. And as far as your question, which is a good question, Nasha, and Esther said it before too, the date means that on this day we're going to execute you. But not that before, if you're going to go and do your things, it's not going to contribute to it's like in Russia. The people for years were teaching in the underground. And one day they caught them and they killed them on that day in 1938. The same people, and we know the names and their families. Some of them live in Crown Heights and in Chabad, right? They were teaching from 1930, 31, 32, 33.
Caught yet. This is, in the Purim story, it's dead man walking. The decree was already sealed.
Okay, so what? Yes, so therefore, what's your point?
And the decree had a date.
So fine.
It's not the same as saying somebody who's learning underground and they haven't been caught yet and they're at risk, and that's a Mesiras Nefesh.
So I'm asking you, if you know there's a decree against Chas v'Shalom, a community, a person, all that, you feel at ease until the decree happens? Of course not.
No.
They could have converted. That was the point.
No.
They could have converted, and then they would.
Right, and they had a simple
Your answer to my question is the Mesiras Nefesh was 24,000 children gathering together to learn.
That's only one example. That's an example because the Gemara brings that. I don't know if other. If they would have converted, I'm asking you, would there be a problem?
Yes.
What?
Yes, according to my understanding of how Chazal classically learned, that the whole difference between Hanukkah and Purim was that the Yavanim Davka wanted the Jews to stop being Jews, and that's why we say Hallel. And on Purim we celebrate with Gashmias because it was to wipe out the physicality of the Jewish nation, regardless of their Deah.
No, not regardless of their Deah. That you added those words, not regardless of their Deah. If they would have converted, they would have not been killed. Who are you talking about? Now you bring a source for those last words. What? Bring a source for those last words.
In the Gemara that says it.
What?
Give me a Gadaf in the Gemara that says it.
No, but you said you quoted a Gemara and you added to the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't say that if they would have converted, they would have been killed.
Does the Gemara say that if they had converted, they would have been saved?
It's logical.
I don't see I don't. I think the Gemara teaches otherwise.
How does the Gemara teach otherwise? There's a decree for Jews to be killed. If you're not Jewish any longer, would you be killed? It's logical. You don't need a Gemara for that.
I think history disproves you, like what Hitler Yamach Shemot did. Even if you had a trace of Jewish blood and you weren't a Jew, he wanted to wipe out the Jewish nation. That was Haman, the Amalekite. That was Amalek.
I'm asking you, did Hitler kill Christians? I mean, I'm saying.
Yeah.
No. I'm saying, did he wipe out he selected gypsies, Jews,
But I'm saying even people who did not identify as being Jewish, if they were
converted,
Jewish ancestor, they were also killed. They themselves could have been the furthest thing from a Torah observant Jew or even a halachic Jew, and yet they were wiped out.
Again, I don't think we can make a comparison to Hitler. I mean, it's a different time, a different.
Malaki.
That's not.
Thank you, Menashe. I have someone on my side.
Yeah. Anyway, so when and if I find a source for the Alter Rebbe, I'll share it with you. But
Thank you.
this is the source for what the Rebbe says here, and this is not the first time it's said in many Maamorim, and it's a Chiddush, and that's it. Now, regarding your, so that basically this discussion
Yeah.
tackles both questions. What?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Okay, let's go now. Chaim Zev, I hope it didn't bore you. I hope you followed the conversation, but it was a very good conversation. I mean, discussion about the Pshat. Okay, Pedic Zayin on page 370. V'hine yedua she'amasiras nefesh bepoyol al teiro mitzvahs, that the actual sacrifice, mesiras nefesh, for teiro mitzvahs shall call Yisrael of all Jews, hoisa bepurim. No, sorry, Ches, wrong chapter. Page 374. Pisa yesh levaya kesher v'seder and yonesh b'maimer. The Rebbe says, based on what we said before, we can explain the flow of the previous Rebbe's maimer v'kibla Yehudim. Be'bir aposik, in explaining the verse Vata, Titzave, Hashem and Moshe should command the Jews to bring the oil. First, my father-in-law explains the verse Vata Titzave. And what does he explain? That Moshe is the one that connects the Jews with Hashem. How? By sustaining and feeding faith. After my father-in-law explains that, after this he explains that all those leaders of the Jews in each generation is Pashtusa de Moshe, which are the extension of Moshe, they strengthen the faith of Yidden. In other words, not only Moshe, but also the leaders of every generation. Ukemoi, for example, Mordechai, which is Moshe Shebedoire, Mordechai, who was the Moshe of his generation, Shechizak as Munosim Shel Yisrael, who strengthened the faith of the Yidden during his time, Lamed Chazak, to stand strong, to study Torah, to do mitzvahs. Finally, my father-in-law, for the third point in his Maamar, says, he explains in the Maamar the meaning of the crushed to the luminary, which is found seemingly this part of the Maamar, which explains this Kosis Lamoyer, is referring to Moshe. Bring the oil. Moshe should command the Jews to bring oil. What type of oil? Crushed for the luminary. So who is the? This is for Moshe. So in other words, like this. I'm going to tell you about orally what the question is going to be here in this chapter. The order doesn't seem to flow. He starts off with Moshe. He goes to the extension of Moshe of every generation, and he ends off with Moshe. He should have first said, about Moshe, then say this explains why Hashem's command is to bring the crushed oil to Moshe, and then they say that there is a Moshe in every generation. That's not the order of the Maamar. That's the question in this chapter. Let's continue. That the primary actualization of the crushed oil concept is through the extension of Moshe, Shebizman Agolos, during the time of Agolos, i.e., Kos is crushed, She'oireru B'Yisrael, which led to the arousal within the Yidden, Koyach HaMesiras Nefesh, the power of Mesiras Nefesh, Shalem that they had. Sha'yidei Zeh, through this, Who ikir gilui etzem haneshama more, this reveals the essence, which is the illuminary. So again, the question is, the order is out of sequence, seemingly. But look at the question. I told you the question that's coming up now before we're inside. We're on top of page 376. There would be now, based on the explanation that we mentioned earlier, the concept of crush to the illuminary, shayach, is applicable to the first idea that you, Moshe, shall command the Jews. To the fact that Moshe, his extension, in each generation, as Yisrael, they connected Yidden with Hashem, with Hashem. Uvakosuf, and in the verse, Nema Kosus Lamoy. But the Rebbe says, the fact is that in the verse, the words crushed to the illuminary were on 377, it said after the Hemshech Levitchu Elecha Shemen Zayazoch. The Inya V'yikhu Elecha, the concept you shall take to yourself, She Yisrael Mevi'in Shemen LaMoshe, that the Jews are to bring the oil to Moshe, who She Yisrael Musifim Toisves Oil B'Moshe, that the Yidden add something that Moshe didn't have. The Rebbe says that the pasuk, the words kosis lamor, follows the words v'yikhu elecha shemen zayis. Take to yourself oil, crushed olives, crushed oil for the illuminary. So the Rebbe says that doesn't in the pasuk, it doesn't come after Vata Titzave. It comes after v'yikhu elecha. And we learned earlier, what is the idea? Why does Hashem say bring to Moshe? Because the Yidden, by experiencing kosis lamor, the crushed feeling of being in Golus and all that, they give Moshe something that Moshe didn't have, as we explained in the first and second shir, etc. So the Rebbe's question in this chapter is that it's out of sequence. I want to read some of the notes here because they're important. Okay? So, and also, I wanted to, yesterday when I told you, Ein Eid Nasa Dai, 1 second, Moshe, yeah? Moshe, yeah? What?
Rabbi Dalfin, quick question. I actually asked this earlier, but with the luminary, crush for the luminary, as we say in English, luminary meaning for the light. Is that correct?
The source of light.
So what does it mean, the source of light?
Where does light come from? Where does when the sun shines, where does the shine come from? The shine that you have here, where does it come from?
From the sun itself.
Oh, that's called the illuminary, the sun ball.
So in this case, the menorah.
No, in this case it says bring oil, crush the olives, right? Should be well crushed for the purpose of lighting the menorah. But the word lamar doesn't mean to light.
It means the actual.
It means something. It means like somehow it touches the source of light, which doesn't make sense. That's exactly what he's working on here in the Maamar. It should have said kosis laho'ir. Look, it should be crushed for the purpose so that it will shine and brighten up the menorah in a way that'll be proper. So the proper Hebrew word would be laho'ir. It doesn't say that. It says kosis lamor. Somehow, this crushed olives and oil will illuminate, will cause something to the source of light. What does that mean? That's his question, and his answer is that you have to touch the source, because if you don't touch the source, the light is weak. The light is not as deep and powerful that it could be and should be, especially during the time of self-sacrifice. So in other words, let me just give you an example, so that in a normal situation, having light is adequate, right? You get up in the morning, you go to shul. But when you have to run into bombshells, into miklatim and all that, it's not lahoyer. When are you davening? When are you going? Are you standing? You're in the middle of the thing. You have to run here. In other words, there's a situation when lahoyer doesn't work. Lahoyer is the norm. Here is oil, pour it into the menorah, and it shines. Then there's a situation when that's not adequate, because we have a chaotic state. We need a transcendent experience. We need something that touches much deeper. And the Rebbe says that's the significance of the word kosis, that there is a position and a time that you need kosis. In other words, why does the Torah have to say the word kosis, crushed? Everyone understands that if you want oil, you have to crush an olive. I mean, why? What? Vata Titzave bnei Yisrael v'yikhu elecha Shem zayis. Would that not be adequate to explain what Hashem wants? Moshe, tell the Jews we need oil. Finished. All of a sudden, Hashem adds words in the Torah. Kosis lamoy, totally unnecessary. And then, what does it mean? Well, it means crush. Oh, like we didn't know it means to crush. If it wouldn't say that, just it would say bring oil. Of course you have to crush olives. You get no oil you don't crush olives. So there's the idea of Shem Zayin Zoch, but the Rebbe in the Chassidus, in this Maamar, he says kosis represents a mindset. And that's why, because we're talking about a specific mindset, i.e., Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, during the time of Golus, it touches and brings into the experience the illuminary, ma'or, not only just a regular shine. That's the the thing here. What I wanted to say from yesterday is that why a witness cannot be a judge. So it's no, I'm sorry, that's something else. What I wanted to say yesterday is that the Rebbe says that my father-in-law wrote this about Mordechai, so he made the ruling about himself. That's based on in Pirkei Avos, din v'cheshbon, right? First comes the din, and then comes the cheshbon. Shouldn't it be just the opposite? It's a famous question. First you make a cheshbon, you make an account, and then you have a judgment. You have a decision. It doesn't say cheshbon v'din. So the Rebbe explained once, a very famous talk of his, that no, based on the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid's word, one of the two, that a person renders the cheshbon based on them making a judgment. When they judge someone else, it's going to come back to them. So the cheshbon does foul the din, because the din is referring to when you judge others. And when you judge others, cheshbon, then that accounting is going to come back to you, both in negative stuff and in good stuff, in good things. In this case, good things. The fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe says, my father-in-law made a din, saying that Mordechai is the Medrash says is the extension of Moshe, but explaining it, that judgment that he made in explaining that concept bounces back to him, that he himself is in that situation. And finally, let's go here, back to page, very bottom of page 375, because it gives good clarity here. To summarize the note, the Maamar of Kippur Yehudim discusses the following three fundamental concepts. A, that Moshe connects Titzave, the word Titzave. Moshe connects the Jewish people to Hashem by bringing the essence, next page, of their souls into revelation. Moshe does that. He brings the essence of the Jewish people's souls into revelation. It's alluded to by the phrase, and you shall command the children of Israel. That's the first point in the Maamar of the previous Rebbe. Point number 2, B. that the extension in exclamation marks of Moshe performed the same function and there's no okay, and C, that the essential spark of Hashem's of godliness within the Jewish soul is revealed through self-sacrifice in the era of exile, which is alluded to by the phrase crushed for the illuminary. One might have expected the Maamar of the Kibla Yehudim to have explained the first and the third concepts, and then to explain the second concept. The second concept is introduced between the first and the first two. However, because it is through the extension of Moshe who brings the essence of the Jewish souls into revelation that the Jews are able to summon up the Mesiras Nefesh, so to confront the challenges of exile. So anyway, that's that point. And that's it. Okay, so next week in Mitzvah Shem, we will continue the Maamar, and we'll start a very interesting latter half of this Maamar that will be very inspiring. And I will see and ask, and if I can find a source to for the Alter Rebbe's Vart. But the first thing is, maybe, Isser, I'd like you to look into that yourself over Shabbos, Torah, or I'll find the reference Blined and I'll send it out. I want you to see the Alter Rebbe's words himself. And then, that's it. Okay, have a great Shabbos, everyone. Today is the Rebbe's brother's yahrzeit, Rabbi Yisrael Aryeh Leib. Rabbi Yisrael Aryeh Leib ben Reb Levi Yitzchok Schneerson. He passed away in France, and the Rebbe had him buried in Tzfas. So he's in Tzfas in the same cemetery as the Arizal. The Shomer Shav and Aliyah. Sei gesund. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.